This is Teaching On, brought to you by Maria, Lily, Taya, Kaylin, Polly, Piper, and Genevieve.
Welcome back to Teaching On, the podcast where we explore the latest trends, insights, and strategies in education to help you create a more dynamic, inclusive, and effective classroom. I'm your host, Maria, and today we're diving into a topic that's essential for every educator. How might education research inform our teaching? No matter if you're an experienced educator or new to the profession, educational research offers valuable information and foster a more inclusive and supportive classroom. In this episode, we'll dive into how research can shape your teaching methods and why it's crucial to stay informed about the latest studies in education. So let's begin. I have some wonderful teachers with amazing credentials: Lily, Taya, Caitlin, Polly, and Piper. So my first question is for Caitlin. Does the size of a class impact how children learn?
Class size can impact the way students learn. It can be either beneficial or detrimental to the child's education. There was an experiment done in 1985 in the state of Tennessee called Student-Teacher Achievement Ratio, or STAR. This project assigned 7,000 kindergartners from 79 different schools to go in different sized classrooms. 4 years later, they went back to see the difference between the classes and found that the kids in smaller classrooms were 2 to 5 months ahead of the peers in larger classrooms. This experiment ended 4 years after, but they checked on the kids again in 8th grade, and the kids who were in smaller sized classrooms were almost a full year ahead of those who weren't. This was later tested again from 2009 to 2013 in New York City public schools. It was shown that the question, does class size matter, has another part to it, which is dependent on how well the teacher is teaching the class. Many of the teachers throughout this process were not what was expected of teachers, and many of them didn't even have their credentials. Having smaller classes with teachers who have their credentials is beneficial for both the student and the teacher. With a smaller class size, it is easier to engage the students in the material being taught, as well as it is for the teacher to manage and properly teach the class, compared to having a class with over 30 students who are confused with the material and struggle with learning in a larger class size.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts on this. I totally agree. I personally found it much easier to navigate a classroom when they were smaller. Large classrooms can definitely feel a bit overwhelming, and I can see how challenging it must be for our teachers too. Juggling so many students at once must be tough, and I can only imagine how hard it is to meet everyone's needs. That actually leads me to my next question. Taya, how do cognitive, emotional, and social factors influence a child's learning process?
Cognitive factors like attention, memory, and problem solving and a child's ability to focus and process information directly impacts how well they learn. Strong cognitive development helps retain information, organize thoughts, and tackle complex tasks. Without this development, we would see very little learning, or at least slowed learning. The faster a child can process data, the more easily they can grasp new concepts. Now, emotional factors are equally important. Positive emotions like curiosity and pride or enjoyment boost motivation and make learning want to be repeated. However, stress and anxiety in a child's life can hinder concentration and memory, reducing learning ability in the classroom. Emotional regulation helps children stay engaged and manage frustration when faced with challenges. A child's self-esteem and confidence also plays a key role. Believing they can succeed encourages persistence and effort, and we've seen this in everyday classrooms. The children who are less confident in themselves and their learning aren't going to attempt to gain more knowledge because they are afraid they will make mistakes. However, the children who are proficient in their learning usually are the ones who realize they are good at what they do, which builds their resiliency because they know they can get good at a task. Social factors include interactions with peers, teachers, and family. Social engagement, whether through group work or discussions, can deepen understanding and improve communication skills. Supportive relationships encourage helping children to feel more confident in their abilities. Additionally, a child's social environment, including their cultural background and family support, influences access to learning opportunities. Unfortunately, this isn't always fair due to those who face finances and different resources that can be provided in schools. Finally, these factors don't work in isolation. They interact with, strengthen, and interchange with each other. For example, emotional engagement enhances cognitive skills, while social support can help a child to overcome challenges. Together, these elements create a well-rounded learning experience that supports a child's academic and personal growth.
I'm so excited that educators are becoming more aware of their students' needs, especially when it comes to things like cognitive development, emotional well-being, and social factors. Understanding all of these elements can influence a child's learning process is such a game changer. Even just a little bit extra insight can make such a big difference in how educators can support and assist their students. It's truly wonderful to see. Let's take a quick break. Up next, we have Lily, Piper, and Polly.
We want to use this quick break to thank our sponsor, HelloFresh. We know you teachers work endless nights and sometimes don't have enough time to figure out what you want to make for dinner. With HelloFresh, dinner is made easy. Use code TEACHER for 50% off a 6-month trial. Again, that's code TEACHER for 50% off your entire 6-month trial. Now back to the podcast.
We're back with our wonderful educators. Let's dive into learning styles. Lily, how do different learning styles such as visual, auditory, and kinesthetic affect the way students absorb information, and should teaching be adapted to these styles?
First of all, I think we're all completely guilty of this. Having a teacher tell you that you learn best through drawing, writing, listening, or watching, we've all heard it. I think it is important to address, believe me, I wish I'd realized this sooner, that students of all abilities are able and should learn in many different ways. I think that by diversifying the ways that students are introduced to information is only going to make them more agile in learning new things. For example, in a 2018 Atlantic article written by Olga Kazan, she references a survey that Neil Fleming created to determine learning styles. VARK, signifying visual, auditory, reading, and kinesthetic, is a quiz that students were given to identify their learning style. Now to the main question, can they help students absorb information better? Many studies have proven no. In fact, studies have shown, much like the study conducted by Barbara Calhoun and Beth Rogowski, that there was a meshing hypothesis that was proposed and studied but found no evidence. Instead of focusing on how each student learns, instead, educators should focus on the engagement of their lesson, linking their lesson to more multimodal ways of learning. Multimodal, not meaning teaching each kid in their own way, but instead allowing students to communicate and show their learning in multiple ways. Learning in more modes and formats can lead to a better retention of the material that students are receiving each day. Not only is it beneficial academically, but socially. Students are not being separated by their learning styles. Instead, they are growing together by learning and communicating together. They are collaborating on different forms of learning. I most definitely think that more educators need to implement multimodal learning into their lesson plans to engage and further benefit everyone's learning.
You make some fantastic points, Lily. It's so true that we all learn in different ways. There's no one-size-fits-all approach. Teachers have so many wonderful ways to support their students and help them thrive by embracing those different learning styles. My next question is for Piper. What impact does a teacher's demeanor have on a child's success with learning?
First, I believe it's important to mention how learning ties into identity. This is a topic Nasir and Cooks talk about in a research paper called How Learning Settings Afford Identity. The paper discusses how learning is widely associated with one's social and cultural background. We hear this come up a lot in discussions about education. We know children tend to succeed at higher rates when they have less outside stressors occurring in their personal lives. These stressors tie into cultural and economic backgrounds. This can be languages spoken at home, income level, access to opportunities, etc. So it is clear a lot of success with learning comes from one's background. However, Nasir and Cooks explain how the way teachers talk, teach, and engage with students tend to play into these different backgrounds and cultures, which can form their identity within the education system. For example, teachers who know their student comes from a harsher family life may set lower expectations for that student. This comes from their internal bias, and thus the student is not being challenged and may believe they don't deserve to be. Students have an inner voice that is formed from the way everyone around them talks to and about them. This inner voice ties into their identity, which hugely comes from the environment of the classroom. It is important to teach students equally and equitably, create an inclusive and comfortable environment, and remove bias. When a classroom is cold and rigid, meaning the teacher is not inviting, kind of cranky, and not understanding, students are less likely to raise their hand, participate, attempt new skills, pay attention in class. This perpetuates the cycle between teachers being cold and students not wanting to learn. The environment is not safe for them to learn. The cycle pours over into a student's inner voice and their identity. They struggle to learn in a harsh environment, thus their inner voice forms around the idea that they struggle to learn in general. This inner voice then becomes part of their identity.
Our environment plays such a big role, especially for students in their classrooms. The way teachers set up their space and interact with their students can have a positive or negative impact. As you mentioned, if a teacher is mean or cold, it makes learning so much harder for kids. After all, kids don't learn well from people they don't feel connected to. This brings us to our last question of the evening. Polly, why is stereotype threat present in education?
Well, when stereotypes are present in society, children experience them in their daily lives. They become fearful of what others think of them, and they don't want their peers to associate them with the beliefs surrounding their race. They begin to put a lot of effort into fighting common beliefs, but when they start focusing so much attention on fighting the stereotypes, they struggle to perform well. This may cause students to internalize their stereotypes because of their inability to succeed, even though the reason that they aren't performing well is because they are anxious about confirming that stereotype. Over time, students often fall to the sense of hopelessness that they feel and defensively disidentify with high academic and intellectual achievement. The inability to perform well due to the focus on the perpetuation of the negative stereotype is created most often when the student becomes frustrated. When tasks are difficult, the stakes feel high, the students can easily feel weighed down by the feeling of needing to perform well despite social expectations. So this becomes like a cycle for them, and it forms because there is a lot of pressure on students of color. The pressure is heightened for many students when conditions are placed to emphasize importance of success, like prizes, competition, and audience approval. This is something that we as educators can avoid in our classrooms because this tactic usually just does more harm than it does good. Many children already compare themselves to others, so it's easy to understand how the presence of stereotypes can maximize this occurrence.
It's so unfortunate that we have stereotype in the classrooms, but I'm happy that we're bringing awareness to this topic and the other topics that we've discussed tonight. Educational research is essential and has helped us all become better educators. I just want to take a moment to thank everyone for being here and for sharing your thoughts and insights today. I feel like we've learned so much, and I'm excited about all the valuable information we've gained. For our listeners at home, thanks for tuning in and to Teaching On, your go-to podcast where we learn together and ask clarifying questions. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you again for our contributors, Polly Startup, Lily Bailey, Maria Budas, Kaylin Lepe, and Taylor Basir. This was your host, Genevieve, and check back with us next week for a new episode. We upload every Thursday at 4 p.m. Central Time. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you on the next one.